right, welcome in everyone. We're diving deep today. Specifically for all you pastors and Bible study leaders out there, we're going to tackle Philippians 2, 3-4.
Oh, a familiar one.
You know it, but we're not doing the usual Sunday school stuff, okay?
Right.
We're going for those unexpected angles, those sermon illustrations that really make people think.
Interesting.
So we've been looking at all these sermons from pastors who took, some really creative approaches.
Okay.
We're talking Texan sayings, Roman battle tactics, even an Olympic gymnast. We're going to break down how they made this familiar passage feel fresh.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Even with a well-known verse, there's always more to discover, especially when you see how different pastors approach it.
Okay, let's jump in. One theme that really popped out was how many sermons focused on humility, how countercultural it is, especially back then in ancient Greece.
Yeah, back then, humility was basically weakness.
Right. So in that culture, putting others first, that would have been radical.
Totally radical. And yet, that's exactly what Philippians 2, 3-4 tells us to do.
Exactly. And some pastors really drove that home. One even compared God working in us to like a chiropractor, making an adjustment,
Okay, I'm listening.
He said it's God realigning our character, helping us shed those ego-driven tendencies so we can reflect his glory more fully.
I like that. It's not about making ourselves smaller. It's making space for God to work. It's getting our lives in line with his purpose, even when it means letting go of our own plans.
All right, so for you listening, think about this. How would you use that chiropractor idea with your congregation? What other metaphors or illustrations would help them see the strength and humility?
Because it is strength, isn't it? It's a different kind of strength.
Absolutely. And this leads us to another big theme, unity. Philippians 2, 3-4. It's not just about you being humble. It's about how that humility makes the church strong, unified.
Right. It builds the community.
And that's where the Greek word koinonia comes in.
Right.
We translate it as fellowship, but it's way deeper than that.
Yeah. Koinonia means we're really connected. It's a shared life, shared purpose, more than just showing up at church together.
One pastor used a really valid picture for this. He talked about Roman soldiers in their shield formation.
Ah, I've heard this one. It's good.
Each soldier's safety depended on everyone else holding their shield strong, creating that unbreakable wall.
Powerful image. We're not meant to go it alone as Christians, are we?
Not at all. We support each other, protect each other. We're stronger together.
Exactly. We need each other.
Then there was this other pastor speaking in Texas. He used the phrase, all y'all, to get across that idea of everyone belonging.
All y'all. Huh. That's interesting.
It might seem like a strange choice, but it got me thinking. Southern hospitality, it's all about including everyone, caring for each other genuinely.
I see your point. It's about creating that feeling of belonging, like you said, and really supporting each other, like those Roman soldiers with their shields.
So for everyone listening, always looking for fresh illustrations, what are some modern ways you could explain koinonia? What stories from your own world could help people understand the importance of unity in the church?
It's about finding ways to make these ancient ideas click for people today.
Exactly. And we'll be back in a bit with more.
Yeah, it's amazing how these little cultural things can give you a whole new angle. And speaking of new angles, another theme that kept coming up was this idea of finding joy in other people's success.
Yeah, it's funny, right?
Oh.
Because we're so used to competing, striving for ourselves, it's hard to really celebrate when someone else wins, especially if we're struggling.
But that's exactly what Philippians 2, 3-4 is about, isn't it? Putting aside envy, self-interest, and really being happy for other believers, for their gifts, their accomplishments.
And one pastor even talked about this idea of Freudenfreude, it's German, for joy in the joy of others.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
He compared it to schadenfreude, taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. Makes you think about how those attitudes show up in our lives,
It really does. It's like a fork in the road. Do we focus on our own ego or choose to celebrate the good happening around us?
Right. And to really illustrate that, Freudenfreude, he told this story about Stephen Nedoracek, the Olympic gymnast.
Oh, yeah, I remember him.
He was supposed to win gold, but he ended up losing to another athlete. But instead of being bitter, Nedoracek was actually happy for the guy, cheering him on, pure joy on his face.
It's a perfect example of what Philippians 2, 3-4 looks like in action. Letting go of your own need for recognition and finding happiness in seeing others succeed, especially when it helps everyone.
So thinking about our listeners, the pastors, Bible study leaders, how can we grow this Freudenfreude in our congregations? How do we get people to celebrate each other's gifts, victories, even when they're going through their own tough times.
That's a big one. I think it starts with us, the leaders. When we truly celebrate our staff, volunteers, church members, it creates a culture where everyone feels valued.
For sure. And it's not just about big achievements either. It's about those little everyday things.
Yeah.
Kindness, generosity, just serving each other. Making a space where people can share their joys and struggles without judgment.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another big point from Philippians 2:3-4, that challenge of overcoming selfish ambition, as Paul puts it. We all face that temptation, and it shows up in so many ways.
One pastor put it really bluntly. He said, selfish ambition is basically asking, am I going to get paid?
Whoa, gets your attention right.
It does. And let's be honest, we all think about that sometimes, more than we'd like to admit.
It's true. He found a way to make the verse hit home, cut through all the fancy words. It's not just about money. It's that what's in it for me attitude that sneaks into everything.
And it can be so sneaky, hard to even see, especially when we think our intentions are good.
Exactly. So how do we help people see those subtle ways selfish ambition might be holding them back in their growth, their relationships? How do we help them see things from a more Christ-centered view?
Well, one pastor used this idea of spiritual misdirection. He talked about Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel. Grove said companies fail because they get so focused on their past wins that they miss the signs of change around them.
Oh, interesting. So he's saying we as Christians, we can get misdirected too. So caught up in our own stuff, our comfort zones, that we miss God's bigger plan.
Right, and that can cause so many problems, divisions in the church, losing our focus on helping others.
Yeah, we get stuck looking inward. So we have to help people recognize those me-first tendencies and have the humility to get back in line with God's will.
Absolutely, and sometimes those me-first tendencies even show up in how we lead, how we do ministry.
You're right. And that's where some of these pastors use sports analogies. Like one compared it to a basketball player who keeps the ball instead of passing to a teammate who's open for a shot.
Makes sense.
Right. And another pastor talked about misdirection plays in football. The quarterback pretends to hand off the ball to one player, but then throws it to someone else completely.
Ah, I get it. So those analogies show how selfish ambition distracts us from what matters. We're not playing for ourselves, we're playing for the whole team, the body of Christ.
Yeah.
So thinking about our own leadership, how do we make sure we're not falling into that selfish ambition trap in how we lead, how we serve our congregations?
Yeah, it really challenges you to look at your own heart, Are we really about serving God and others, or is it all about us?
It's something we have to keep checking, for sure. And these sermons give us some good ideas for shifting from that me-first mindset to thinking about others more.
One thing that really struck me was how many pastors used examples that people could relate to. Real life stuff, not just those cliche Sunday school answers. It's like they wanted to go deeper, connect with people on a different level.
And they did. Some of them were really creative. Like one pastor used C.S. Lewis's take on humility.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
Well, Lewis said true humility isn't about putting yourself down. It's about forgetting yourself completely when you're serving others. That's a good distinction. It's not self-deprecation. It's about looking outward.
Exactly. And another pastor told a story about Gregory Peck, the actor. He was known for being humble and kind. And this pastor pointed out how Peck never used his fame to get special treatment, treated everyone the same, waiter or Hollywood big shot, didn't matter.
That's a great example. Humility in everyday life, not just grand gestures.
Right. And then there was the pastor who talked about John the Baptist. John was a powerful guy himself, but he was totally happy to see Jesus' ministry grow, even as his own kind of faded away.
That's powerful, putting your ego aside like that.
Yeah.
Recognizing that God's plan is bigger than your own ambitions.
Yeah. So these are just a few, but it shows how powerful it is to use stories and people that everyone knows to make these biblical principles real.
So for everyone listening, here's a challenge for you. What stories or people from your own community could you tie into Philippians 2:3-4? Who are those everyday heroes that live out humility, unity, selfless service? How can you use their examples to inspire your people, to challenge them?
Because that's how we bring the Bible to life, right? Connecting it to the real world, to what people are going through every day.
We've covered a lot today, from ancient Greece to Texan sayings to Olympic gymnasts. But the bottom line is this. Philippians 2:3-4 isn't just a verse to memorize. It's a call to action.
It's a call to look at our own hearts, let go of those selfish ambitions, and embrace the humility, that unity that Christ showed us. It's about finding joy in serving others, celebrating their wins, building each other up.
And maybe, just maybe, if we start really living these principles, the world will notice.
Imagine if our churches, our communities, even our whole nation really lived out Philippians 2, 3 to 4. That's something worth working for.
So as you go back to your sermon prep, your Bible study planning, why don't you take another look at this verse? See it with fresh eyes. Which of these approaches will connect with your people? What unique angle will you bring to Philippians 2, 3 to 4?
The possibilities are out there, and the impact could be huge. Go out there and make this ancient wisdom come alive, change lives, change the world.
That's it for our deep dive today. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the Word.